And he was beloved by African people everywhere. Even those of us who were not philosophically committed to nonviolence. We loved King. I was not about to be a King follower, but we loved King. He taught Africans how to mobilize. He moved the African people into action. People like to say, well, King was all this and he just believed in nonviolence. No, King believed in struggle. Even though it was nonviolent, he was an activist. He challenged the oppressed. He said America is the what? Greatest purveyor of violence on earth. He was not an Obama who was sending drones and murdering people around the world. He said America is the greatest purveyor on earth. And he mobilized against him. He was one of the first to organize against Vietnam. And they want to compare Obama, who's organizing to kill people all over the Middle East and in Africa with King. So he mobilized African people, and this is part of what made him dangerous. Not the question of violence and nonviolence, because we had that part of it tied up. What made King a threat was his ability to mobilize masses, millions of African people, including those of us who didn't believe in nonviolence. So King was assassinated, as we know, on April 4th, 1968. But something else was happening, because what had happened with the Civil Rights Movement, despite the fact that this movement was funded by white liberals, despite the fact that this movement represented an alliance between the liberal sector of the white ruling class and the liberal sector of the African middle class, despite that, it was something that needed masses of African people, and that's why King was so important. And it mobilized masses of African people, sharecroppers. Preachers didn't turn out that tough in these mobilizations. Ordinary people did. Fannie Lou Hamer turned out. And young people, students. Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was born in this process, and Fannie Lou Hamer became a part of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And the thing is that the masses were to be the fodder, were to be the forces that they would use to drive this struggle that would allow the African petty bourgeoisie to ascend, to integrate into the capitalist system, and the white bourgeoisie to be able to carry out its mission, its interest in terms of having African people to facilitate the need to enhance production in this country subsequent to the Second Imperialist War. Okay?
Yeah.
Before the Second Imperialist War, England had a monopoly on what was coming out of India. England had a monopoly of what was coming out of Nigeria in terms of resources and things like that. France and Germany, all of these were the ones who were primarily getting the loot that was coming from Africa and from other parts of the world. Now the United States is the big dog after this war. And so you have all these resources coming. And I just want to say that when King was killed, he was beloved by African people. But something had happened. They had mobilized all these people, Africans, and we were just to be, the workers were just to go out when the preacher said go out and demonstrate. But we suffered in this country. Lynching was the national pastime in this country, or another thing they used to call nigger knocking. White people get bored, don't have nothing to do, go out and do some nigger knocking. Go and beat up some Africans, lynch some Africans. This was tradition in this country. And so you had this movement, and Africans were more and more involved in organized, and this is critical, organized resistance, organized struggle. And so what began to happen is people like Fannie Lou Hamer, ordinary African people, got involved, and what they did not quite understand, the rulers, is that the masses, once involved in changing the world, changing their circumstances, become changed themselves. You can't get the masses involved in some social movement like that to change society or to change the world without the people becoming changed. And this is what happened. So we had this incredible movement sweeping this country, but it was also at the same time sweeping the rest of the world. Vietnam. King intervened in the Vietnam question, which is one of the things that made him problematic. All over Africa. In Cuba, just a few years later, Cuba would become independent as a consequence of the struggle that was being made there. And then what you saw happening in this country, of course, was Malcolm X, the extraordinary Malcolm X, the profound critic of the nonviolent movement in this country, the most fundamental force in terms of ideologically taking African people beyond this whole question of civil rights and saying that we got to do for self. That to be self-reliant. So what kind of revolution is this? You're talking about sitting down on the toilet next to white people. So that's no revolution. And then he talked to us and revolution is based on what? Land. Land. And he told us that we had to struggle. He gave us the example of the Vietnamese. He said, don't talk to us about the odds are against you. Why do you care about the odds? He said you didn't care about the odds when the white man sent you to China to fight 1 billion Chinese. When you went to Korea, you fighting 1 billion Chinese and you're talking about the odds. Said it mean nothing when you was fighting a white man. Why should it mean something to you when you fight for yourself? Come on. Like this is what Malcolm, he was a fundamental critic of Martin Luther King. He was assassinated 1965. King assassinated 1968. Lumumba murdered 1960. And Nkrumah overthrown 1966, I should say. And all this stuff was happening. Fred Hampton in 1969. Wow. More than 30 members of the Black Panther Party killed in 1968 alone. Wow. Wasn't just King. It was a movement for liberation of black people that came under assault. And this movement had begun to develop beyond just trying to innovate with white people toward taking control of our own lives, our own destiny, because that was what thrust King into motion. That's what thrust black people into motion. Somebody stole our capacity to create lives for ourselves. Yes. They took our future from us. And King, regardless of what he thought he was going to be about, was involved in the consequence of our future having been robbed from us by imperial white power, the right to be a self-determining people. And you don't have the right to self-determination just because somebody said you integrated. So you integrated. You don't have the right to self-determination anymore. You had the right to self-determination before Europe attacked Africa. Now you don't have it. And because you don't have it, you have a King. You have a Malcolm. You have Black Panthers. You have all these forces around the world struggling about that fact that we no longer had control of our ability to create and recreate life for ourselves. That's what Black Power Blueprint is about. That's how we fall in what King was about, because we are struggling to guarantee that we have the ability to control and create life for ourselves and the people. That's what it's about. That's what it's about. And so don't let people take you off on this. Let me tell you, when they killed King, think about this. King was the minister of nonviolence. When they killed King, masses of African people rose up throughout this country. In fact, it got so serious that they had to surround the White House with tanks. Literally. I'm on the phone with Stokely at the time. I'm in Florida, and Stokely running around strapped and what have you, and he's in D.C. And he's talking about what is happening in D.C. on the ground there in Washington. It's happening in other places, but in D.C. they had to put tanks around the White House because they didn't know just how well organized we might be and whether we had come to our senses. And Malcolm, the consequences of Malcolm X had been such that we go for power instead of going for something else, right? So there were uprising in more than 100 cities in this country when they killed King. 43 men and women were killed. Wow. in this process, in this struggle. 3,500 were injured. 27,000 African people were arrested. And they had used 58,000 National Guardsmen and Army troops that joined the local, state, and police forces to put that uprising down. This is when the King of Peace was killed. Yeah. This is when the father of nonviolence was killed. This was the response by the oppressed, colonized African people in this country to his death. This is what he meant to us, and now all that's been suppressed. And instead of King's dream, if you will, that Malcolm X talked about tonight now, instead of the objectives that King fought for, you don't have any of that.
Yeah, come on.
What you have is a Martin Luther King Highway, a Martin Luther King Boulevard, a Martin Luther King Street, and you get off on Monday on Martin Luther King holiday.
Yeah.
That ain't what King fought for. No. King did not fight for a damn holiday.
Yes.
He did not die for African people and have a damn holiday. He fought for African people to be free, and he knew that they would kill him. He knew it. If you ever look at the last speech of Martin Luther King, it's clear.
Yes.
And the American government killed King. Wasn't Trump. I want to be clear on that.
Come on now.
Wasn't Trump. It was the American government that killed King. It was the same government that killed Lumumba. It was the same government that chased Che Guevara down in Bolivia and killed him in 1967. It was the same government that killed Malcolm X. It was the same government that overthrew Nkrumah. All of them conspired to make sure that black people on this planet Earth would never have our freedom and control of our own destiny. That's why we have Black Power Blueprint here. That's why we have it here. So we want to continue that mission. I know I've spoken too long now. I've exhausted my 10 minutes, I'm sure.
You got 2 more.
But I want to say, brothers and sisters, that we have to capture our own future.
Yes, we do.
King knew he was going to die. You cannot allow fear to stop you. Fear should not be able to turn us into cowards.
No.
See, you can be afraid. You crazy if you fighting this white man and you ain't scared.
Yeah.
Because you've seen the evidence of what he will do to you. He's dropped atomic bombs on helpless people around this world.
Yeah.
In Japan in particular. Civilians, murdered them all. And so you know what he'll do. Lynchings was the pastime. And everybody, we are faced with all kinds of lynching today, right here at the White House. In broad daylight, they do it to us. Broad daylight, they take our communities. And this theft of our communities, why do you think it's not just happening in St. Louis? Look at Chicago, look at Detroit, look at Washington, D.C., look at Harlem, New York, everywhere. This power of a counterinsurgency that controls African people. If you don't believe, if you don't believe that the United States government has a permanent, in place, contingency plan to deal with black people, you're out of your mind. Because we are fundamental to anything that approximates freedom in this country and around the world. We always have been. So, brothers and sisters, I want to appreciate you being so patient with me. And let's build this campaign. Let's do it. It can be ours. It should be ours. And you have one of the greatest criminal enterprises in this country right here in St. Louis. They do it in broad daylight. They use Negroes who call themselves elected officials in most instances. Look at what we were able to do right here. The people were able to do right here. No elected official did a damn thing to make this happen. Look how we've already changed North St. Louis. Look at how it's gotten up and down here as a consequence of this project. Because the African working class, we have built everything they've got for them. Now we're building for ourselves, and we're calling on all our allies to join us in that process.